Hi there. We're going to just take a moment and wait for everyone to come. Okay, I think I have it recording now. So, welcome to the pop-up paint party for February as we are working on the Valentine's heart project for this month. And this is actually going to turn into a once a month little club down the road here as soon as I get all my ducks in a row. So thank you for participating and being a part of this. I'm going to take a moment here and share my screen so that you can see what I'm doing. I hope that you went ahead and downloaded the download so that you have that as a pattern if you're wanting to use that. If you want to do your own freehand, that's wonderful. Go for that. But if you want to follow along and use this pattern, you're welcome to. Make sure you download that and have that ready. All right, let me go ahead and share the screen. That'll make it a lot clearer what I'm talking about. Perfect. Move that right over there. And I'm going to expand my screen a little bit. I think you can see it just fine, but I'm going to expand it so I can see it. Try to turn my messages off too. Okay. All right. So here we start. Very first one in February. Thank you for your participation. Now, these are just some that I did several of them. I'm going to take a minute. If you have not transferred yours onto your paper, like I've done with these, then let's go ahead and do that. And so what you'll do is basically take your pattern, get that tape off. I tape mine down. You can tape it to your table or any painting surface that you have. Tape it down. And I've used painter's tape here simply because it will lift up a little bit easier than masking tape, but you can use masking tape. The painter's tape, you still have to be careful when you're lifting off the page. What I've also used is my transfer. It's graphite transfer paper that I had purchased. It looks just like this. You have to really pay attention to which side is the graphite side. It's always the shiny side, and then the dull side is the side. Well, they're both shiny if you get them under the light, but you can tell as you're looking at it which side is actually the side to transfer, and you put that down. And what I do, oh, but let me pause there for a minute. If you don't have the transfer paper, you can do the good old way of taking your pencil and just going over the back of it like this, just like you used to do back in the days of elementary school. And then you could use that and go ahead and transfer it. So what I typically do is I tape it down on a surface so that it's still. Now, I like to put it on this board. I picked this up at the Dollar Tree last year, so I've yet to see them come back with it. But I've also used maybe a little piece of plexiglass, anything that's a surface that's small enough to use, and that I like to use something rather than just put it on my table, because then I can move it around and it makes it easier when I'm trying to trace something instead of having to move my body. But you do use whatever you've got there. Since I have it on a separate surface than just on the table, to make sure that it does not move around, I usually will take it and tape down both sides temporarily just to make sure that this stays solid. Then I'll take the paper, and because the paper I'm using is a smaller sheet, which is the size I told you, and this goes from end to end, it goes right up pretty close to the sides. I can see with the light on, I can see the edges of my tape, and I had to tape my paper. I could have even come a little bit closer to the edges, just to give myself more space, but I pretty much got right to the edge. See that and see that? They're both right there. But you can move your page over So I'll make sure that it's on there, and then I'm going to be drawing on the paper and not on the tape with this particular one. I center it. You might want a little more at the top if you're wanting to write a sentiment up there or put something, or you might want to move it to the top and write something on the bottom. This is totally your choice on how you prefer to do and what you want. What I did with these, as you see on the paper, I moved them a little bit more towards the top, giving myself more space down here. Now on the one I'll be doing today, notice it's not quite up to the top as it is. So once you've centered it and you figured out where it goes, then tape that sheet of paper down. Just walk you through it. Make sure that what I'm saying is understood. Of course, if you totally understand it, go ahead and move ahead. I'm just doing this slow so that it'll make it clear. But I taped that paper down, so now my paper is not going to move. I lift it up and I put under it my transfer paper, making sure that I've got the graphite down, because several times now I've traced something and I've had that graphite up, and all I've done is traced it to the back of my pattern. But I've got the graphite down, and then I'll go ahead and start transferring that. So let me give you just a few minutes. I'm going to put the recording on pause and let you transfer that. And if you already have, once I put it on pause, just let me know. Give me a little flag of some sort, or send me a text. I mean, not a text, but a message on here, so that I understand that you've got yours done and you're ready to proceed. Put this on pause. Okay, super great. Now that you've got that transferred, let me go back to sharing the screen, and we can just start painting away. Perfect. This is the best part, right? Let me show you a little tip that I saw someone else do, and I just thought it was the neatest thing. If you have, don't go run and grab it right now, just because I'm going to keep moving through this with the recording. But if you ever find an eyedropper, maybe you're already doing this, I don't know. It's nice to be able to use it to fill up your paint trays, because move this over here so you can see a little clearer what I'm doing. That way you're not, when you're using watercolor and you're softening up those little cubes or those little things, and then you're trying to get it over on your palette, it takes forever to do that. But this way, if you just fill up your little palette right away with some water, then you can go in, and I'm going to use this orange over here. You can just add that pigment right away, and it's just more efficient and quicker. That's all. Okay, I took care of that. Now we're going to start with, on this particular one, we're going to start with our background. Let's see, put that over here. And we're going to do the background first, and then we'll start working on the heart. All right. So with the background, I use a larger brush just because it'll cover the surface much quicker. You can use a flat one if you want. I'm using a round tip. I will wet my surface, and I'm going to start at the bottom. Now, how I did this particular one, and I think what I'll do is put it down here so you can see it at the same time what I'm doing. And that way you've got something else to look at besides just what I'm doing here. The reason I use the orange here on the side, let me stop it for a second and tell you, do this the way you want to do it. If you want to use different colors, however you want to do it is perfect. Do it because it's use your personality and do it the way you like. I'm simply showing you this one way that I did it, but there's 1,001 other ways to do it. The reason I used the orange down here was because I knew that in the flowers, I wanted to add some orange and the hot pink. And that way it moves the eye and creates some continuity between the composition. Excuse me. I also knew that I wanted to use turquoise. And I really love these apple greens, you might call them, or they're light avocado is what they're called in my paint palette. So let's go ahead and I'm going to start with filling up my colors. Let's look for the turquoise that I used. If you don't have a turquoise in your paints, then you can simply mix together a green and a blue, and you can create the shade that you'd like. Got turquoise here. I'm going to take it and add it to the tray. See how that just pulls that right in there, that color? Bingo, it's already done. Then I'll clean my brush out. And I'm going to fill in the colors I know right from the beginning I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using, it's called this light avocado. Some may call it apple green. In the cake, it looks that way, but when you paint it on, it actually looks like lime. See that? So, and when it goes on the paper, it looks more yellow, like it's a yellow than a green, but it works great. Okay, what other colors do I need? I've got this orange over here and my pink. Those little trays down here so you can see them. This is a tray I used the other night. So let me add a little more pink to this. Magenta, that's what we'll call. It's not pink, it's magenta. There we go. And I'm going to stir that around because I've got some already in the bottom of that. So I hope you're mixing your paints right now. If you don't have little bowls like this, you can do it on your surface. See, I've used it on here before. And then orange. This is an orange. It also has a tangerine look to it. And I'm just filling my brush and coming right over here. And filling that little bowl. I found a beautiful purple the other night. I could use that in here, but I'm gonna keep with the picture instead of deviating off of it. But please do explore and experiment. And then if you will post yours on the page, I'll tell you what to at when I'm through on the group page, RPC, the Artisan's Journey. If you'll post it on there, it's a free group. It's an open group. Then we can see what you've created. That'll be wonderful. All right, what else am I missing? I've got these, and then I'll add the darker green when it gets closer to that. So for whatever reason, I'm a little nervous to start, but let's just get going with it. You're gonna wet your paper first. You want to put on enough that my goal when I do this is I want the watercolor to do what comes natural to it, and that is to spread. So you want to make sure that you have enough water on here, but you don't want it to be pooling. You don't want it so much that it just pools in an area. All right. And I'm going to start with the turquoise and just dab it in there and let it start moving around on its own. Now I'll be doing a thin layer to start, a light layer, and then towards as I proceed with the painting, then I'll come back and create a little more darkness. I always like to have an extra paper towel or something close by because I tend to use mine to dab when, and I didn't dab this, but I was just showing you. I'm letting it, I've got a lot of water on here, so I'm going to move this down. And I'm leaving this open because that's where, if you notice on this one, I've got the green and they're not really mixed in together. I'm going to dry my brush and I'm going to go back to the turquoise, straight to the color turquoise. And I'll dab that pigment right on and see how it's starting to just, it bleeds out. And I think the reason I love to do this is because it's very relaxing for me. It's like you just let go of the control of having everything. As long as you don't put the water on in the areas that you don't want that color, it won't go in there. It follows the water. So always remember that wherever you have water, it will follow. Okay. It will also dry lighter. Cleaning out my brush now. And I'm going to come in with this green. I'm going to call it lime green. And we're letting it blend. See how it's kind of mixing in. You can't see because it's so pale. But I'll lift this in a second. And if you have little white areas left, that always adds a little bit of interest. So you don't have to necessarily cover the whole thing. And just do a light coat over it. There is no wrong way in doing this. So relax and have some fun. I'm leaving this space open right now because I want to make sure that I get that orange in there. And then of course I can come back and help them to kind of bleed together a little bit. The color is very faint. On my end, of course, I see it, but can you see how it's blending in here? Okay, I'm cleaning my brush. And before I go any further, I am going to now move to the orange and add the orange to it. So let's see. I'm going to wet the surface. And I'm going to work towards the top. I'm going to give a few minutes for this to dry. I don't want it to be totally dry because I would like it to blend a little bit together itself. So I'm just adding the water, and I'm not even going up to my edge here because if you notice in the picture, the blue comes down. I'm going to add the, keep that water going. Just slowly. Now we'll add the orange. And I put it right where those little peaks are and just dabbing it and letting it, let it flow on its own. See, see how it's just, well, yeah, you can see on the camera. I'm trying to see if you can see it. It's blending itself down. It's making these wonderful, it's like crystals, ice crystals. That's a good way to describe it. And as it sits there, it just kind of bleeds itself out more. So I'm going to add more color up here because I would like it to be a little more intense at the top. The intensity to be stronger at the top. And then for it to blend down here. Now I'm scooting it down with my brush. I'm not really brushing it hard. I'm just scooting it down and letting it blend into that green on its own. I'm encouraging it. Encouraging it to meet the green. That's kind of cool. I love that. Now you may not, but I think that's really neat how it just gathers and pulls itself together right there. Okay, and the blue and the orange are meeting each other also. There. All right, we can leave that for a minute. And in this corner, I'm going to add some of the magenta. Not a lot, but just a little bit right there. I'm going to take my paper because my paper towel, and I'm going to dab in this corner because I would like the magenta to be the stronger. And they're just going to turn to mud if I don't lift some of that orange up. So I lifted some of that orange up. See how it created that white space? And I'll bring that down. There. Just a little bit, just so that the eye flows. Now they're already different. This one I had more blue going this way. This one I've got more orange. So like I said, it's just everything's going to be different. Yours is going to be different than mine. Just enjoy the process and let yourself create. Now this is dried quite a bit here, but I'm going back and adding some of the pigment to create a stronger green. And I'm dabbing. I'm just dabbing. And I'm going to go straight to the green itself and put straight pigment on. And letting the water that I already have on the paper move it around. I'm going to move it up into the turquoise. I'm going to go back and grab some of the turquoise itself from the cube, and I'm going to add that down here. Clean out my brush. Now, this particular green, it really does have a lot of yellow in it, and I like it to be a little darker. So I'm going to go to a darker avocado, which is right here. And I use that to shade and to add the depth. I'm going to add that to my palette right here. See the difference? And I'm going to add just a little bit to it to help this to pull it back, because on my paper, it's almost turning yellow instead of green. And I'm wanting it to be leaning more towards the green than looking like I've just put yellow on here. So I'm dabbing this all around. and just playing with it. And if I've got an area where I feel like there's too much pigment and it's not what I really want, then I'll either lift it with my paper towel or I'll take my brush and gently guide it to another area. Just dabbing, dabbing, dabbing. Okay. All right. We're going to leave that for a second, let it kind of dry, and then we can go back and look at it. I'm going to turn this over and let's start on the top. And the top will have more. I'm going to put more of the turquoise in it, the blue in it. And my brush, it has still a little bit of the green pigment in it, so it's already giving it a real faint, as I'm putting water down, a real faint layer of green. Now I'm not going to go into the small areas with this large brush. I'll use a small tip, but I can still use this one for these larger areas. And a little hint here. You see this area right here? I'm just pointing to it. See that space, that space, that space, that space? Those are actually the inside of the heart. And I did make sure that that stayed in this one, but in the other one, so it's really up to you. I added some of the background in here at the top, and it, look at the difference of them. One emphasizes the heart more, and the other one, this one, I felt like it emphasizes the flower more. So there's no right or wrong here. Let's see. Do it however you feel. Or if you accidentally color in an area that you didn't mean to color, that's okay too, because it can all work out. I'm adding a light coat of this green up here. And I'm not going to use, even though I'm putting the green, I'm not going to be using a lot of it because the leaves are going to be green. So that's why I'll be coming in more with the blue. I'm going to stop there with the green. I'm going to clean my brush really well. Wiping it out. And let's now go straight to the turquoise. All right. I'm having to lean over because the light is creating a bit of a glare. I'm going to pull up some of that pigment, and I'm going to touch where it's wet and let the water do all the work. And I'm just simply tapping, or maybe just dragging my brush carefully to pull some of that pigment out. right. Now see, I've got the pigment, it's dried there. So what I'm going to do is take my brush and add some water to it and get it to mix. I'm going to turn this because it's great to be able to look at it at all different angles. That's one thing I do like about being able to have it on a surface that's movable. As you can look at it at the different angles and see the color, it's going to show up a little different. Now I'm going to be brave or lazy, one or the other. Did go into that just a teeny bit. Take my brush over here, wet that brush, dry it off. And brush over it with just the water and it pulls that up. That's a little trick there. You may have already known that, but if you didn't, there's a new trick. Okay, you can already see how that's just blending out. It's looking really pretty. This one, you can see a faint layer of the green underneath. I'm going to continue to go around all the leaves and the stems with the turquoise. And just create a wash. I'll go into this area. And I want to leave the heart completely white inside. So I'm being careful not to fill in those areas, but that's my preference. Do what you like or what you feel. I'm going to take straight pigment and I'm going to hit the edges out here. And I can lift it up a little bit and it will make it go down and bleed itself down. So you can just lift your, if you're able to, on the surface. See how that just helped it just flowed right in there beautifully. Like I said, let the water do the work. Okay, we are going to stop right there for a minute because you can start to overwork it and I want to let it dry and then take a good look at it. Now, a quick way to do that is if you have a hair dryer, and you want to be careful because the hair dryer, if it hits it strong and you've got areas, it will make it, it will push it out. So I'm going to just hold it up here a little bit to get the air on it because I'm not wanting to move the paint. And then I'll bring it down. This is a heat gun. So it's actually putting out more heat than it is blowing. And it dries it really quick. And I love, unfortunately, you cannot see on the screen as well as what I can see here. But I'll lift it up to the camera and see if I can get a better picture of it. There. Okay. Set this up. All of this to me is just beautiful. It looks like a muddy brown in the camera. I'm looking at it and it looks like a muddy brown because this green almost looks like a brown. But in life, it's this rich avocado green. Okay, my friend, let's move on. And I'm going to transfer and change brushes. Now, don't leave your brush just sitting in water. It's not really good for the brush. So go ahead and clean it out and then dry it off. You can take your towel and go like this. You'll want to clean it afterwards, but get it cleaned out and let it sit there. And let's use a small tip, a finer tip brush. And we can start with the leaves and the stem. All right, so we'll start with the lighter color first. And just bringing that right down. I will be going back and using a fine tip marker and outlining. So I'm going to use the light color on top and the darker down here. So I will just be coloring, painting the top part of the leaf here. Sure it's cleaned. I went over a little bit there, so I'm going to lift it up with just, I had, cleaned my brush, dried it out, and then I came over and lifted that and it took that color right off. Typically, most of the time, I won't say every single time because inevitably there'll be a time that it doesn't work, but typically most of the time it does work if you catch it right away. If you let it sit there and dry, then it doesn't tend to want to work as easily. Now these are like the green cap that held the flower before it was in bloom, when it was just a little bud. So we're going to go ahead and color those in. Hope everyone's doing fine. I hope you're doing better than fine. I hope you're doing fantastic. If you're a little nervous about something, just stop, take a deep breath in through your nose, breathe it out, and tell yourself that whatever happens is going to be perfect. There is no grade for this, and there's no comparison. No judgment. I think we're the one that becomes the worst critic for ourselves. We are the worst critic for ourselves. Let's just say it that way. I can guarantee you will show your work to someone else and they will just say, oh, that is so amazing. That's awesome. And you'll sit there and you will pick out every little area that you see something wrong. So have a little mercy for yourself. Okay, I'm almost finished putting on this first layer. There we go. I did go outside that line a little bit. I can see it. You can't see it from the camera, but I'm going to lift it and take it off. But once again, that's the beautiful characteristic of watercolor, is that little movement that it has there. All right, let's see. Do I have all of my light areas done? Yes, I do. Okay, let's come back now. Now, let me just say this. If I was sitting here doing it myself and not doing it as a class, I would probably be doodling back and forth with it. And what I mean by doodling is I would be taking a color and adding it and messing with it and just relaxing and not really trying to create a picture, but focused more on the process of letting the color, watching the colors develop and just really enjoying that. But being that this is a class and you're here to create a final product, then I'm going to just move right along with that. I am adding the darker green here. It's very faint right now, but I'll come back in a few minutes and add another layer on it. It will darken it up. It's almost the same color as what I've already put on. But when it dries, it'll have just a tint difference, a little bit of a, you can see a hint of a difference, but we're going to actually add more pigment to it. So it'll definitely have a deeper color to it. All right, good. So I've got that first layer. I'm going to go back straight to my pigment. And you can use, if you don't have an avocado, you can use any green you have. To create maybe more of an avocado or a moss green, you just simply take your green, put it on the side and add yellow to it. Now, if it's got a blue undertone, it's, it's going to be a little bit different. It may lend to want to go more towards brown. So all right, you see, I put a lot on that one. And if you think, oh, I've got too much or something, then you can always lift it up, running a clean brush over it and lift it up. Now I'm going to go down the stem with it a little bit, just a little. I'm not adding any more pigment. I am pulling from what I have and I'm moving it straight down the stem here. All right, I'm going to repeat that with the next one up. Go ahead and add a little bit of water to it to get it ready. Take some of the green pigment. And see, once you add the water, it just starts to flow all by itself. We're going to let that sit right there. And I'm happy that it is pooling down here towards the bottom because I want that to be a little bit darker so that it gives the illusion of it being back behind. Go to this one. I need to move it towards me closer, but I'll make sure it's still on the screen for you. Right. Now I'm not going to clean my brush. I just about did. I'm going to go to the next one. Why waste that? Go to the next one instead of just clean your brush and do the next one. If you've got an area that is too dark, then you want to clean your brush and work on that area a little bit, but okay. Now I'm going to go back and I'll go to the watered down and I'll bring that down the stem. like that. And we're just going to keep adding layers and layers to it. I'll probably do the other one. I did very deep, vibrant colors. I put a lot of pigment on it. This one I'm gonna go back and forth from the deep colors. Notice the background is deep, but I'm gonna keep this a little bit softer. And that's just my preference for today. Tomorrow I may do it totally different. Okay, you do it. So if you've got deep colors going on right now, wonderful. See, I'm just taking that green. I took straight pigment and I'm brushing it down. And I am leaving it. If it just goes to one side, great. It kind of gives it a little more dimension. I always like to darken the inside where the stem will meet another stem. Darken. So I'll do that on all of these, kind of darken where it comes to a meeting of another stem. Here at the top, I'm turning it upside down. And that's a good thing to do too at times, because it gets your eye away from what it actually is and it helps you to focus straight in on the lines and on the color itself and not the object. It's like a whole new perspective. Last night when I did a pop-up paint party on the Facebook group, I mentioned that it's nice to stop and take a picture of your work with your camera, your phone, and then take a look at it, because it's going to be different from when you're actually looking at it to when you're seeing it on a screen. I was able to see mine up on the screen, and so that helped a lot. It really made it was different. The dynamics of it was totally different. All right. I left this tips right here a little bit dark, I mean lighter, excuse me, a little lighter. But I am going to come back with a little bit of darkness right there, because it's like those two surfaces meet. Okay, there's not much water there. So I will add a little bit of water. Not too much, because I'm not wanting it to pool. Just want it to flow. Leave areas where you don't you don't have to paint all the way from one line to the next. You could leave, like here, I left the tips light. That will automatically help with your shading. Gives it that three-dimensional look. Okay, this one's going to be dry, but I'm going to go ahead and add the pigment. Stick that back in there. Take off a little bit of the water off my brush. You don't ever want your brush to be too full of water. Just enough, but too much will make it bleed. Okay, now I'm taking off the color and I'm just going to go straight with water and help that to blend down in there. See how I tapped it, and it's just tapped it, and the water flows it down by itself. Did you see that? Let's see if I go up higher. Can you see I don't have the deep dark all the way to the edges? I've just tapped it and let the water bring it towards the center. Go back to the straight pigment. Well, I need to get this one wet over here. So I'll put a little, I got pigment already on my brush. And I want to leave some of the light on the top. So I'm just going to drag my brush down towards the bottom of that. Because if you think about the light source hitting it, the light always hits at the top, usually, if that's where the light source is coming, rather than underneath. So the underneaths are going to be darker. Now my brush is cleaned out. It's just straight water. I'm going to turn my palette so that I can pull the paint down. All right, and I've got quite a little puddle there of water. So I'll dab it with my paper towel, but it'll also take some of that pigment up. Looking at it on the screen, it looks great. I think I'm just gonna, oh, there's that question back and forth. I'm gonna dab it there because I can go back and add to it. So with that little bit of confusion for a moment, should I not, should I? There. I just went back in, dabbed it up, went back in, and added some more. I'm gonna go on this one. Adding a little bit more. There's another, see, I'm just adding layers. And as you add layers, where that next layer is, it creates a darkness. I'm gonna add a little water. I'm not going to go to the edge with my water. I'm just going in the fatter areas. It's not a technical term, but it hopefully will give you a good description of what I'm doing. So I'm not coming all the way down to the tips on this one. I'm just doing it up towards the stem area. Clean my brush, dried it off, and I'm just lifting a little bit on this because I'm really wanting to keep some of the tones. All right. And now we're going to continue and do this one. I actually did go to the end of the point on that one, but not that it was a mistake. I just felt like doing it. So you may change your mind is what I'm saying. All right. I'm going to leave that like that. Here's where this meets. And underneath, I want it to be darker. So I'm actually creating a little line there. Clean my brush, wipe it off, and lift some of that up on the top because even though I want it to be dark for the shading, I don't want it to be too dark. Because remember, the light's going to be hitting it on the top. But you do want to give that indication, you know, when there's a bend or there's a curve or something, not a curve, but a bend where two things kind of meet. It's like the darkness lays where those two things meet. Put a little more dark there. I just put a dab right there, just a dab. Just coming back, I've got straight pigment on my brush and I'm just putting dabs right where they come together. I want to intensify and emphasize that. Okay, I found that this one bled over a little bit, so I'm just going to clean my brush like I've done before, dry it off. And to dry it off, I'm actually, if this was my paper towel, I'm just rolling it. Where are you? I'm just rolling it like that and pulling it. And as I roll and pull, it creates that point and it's also drying it off. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just lift some of that right there. And ba-bam, it lifted it up. You can't see it as well down there, but See how it lifted it right up? Fantastic, fantastic. Now you can, I do need to darken this part of this so that I'm consistent with the, but I'm not going to go probably as dark as I have down here. Remember the light source at the top, but I am going to create another layer. So I will use the watered down and just do another layer over it. And that will darken it. Okay. Stand back a little bit from yours and look at it and say, if it's becoming stressful and it's not relaxing, then we're focusing too much on making it look just like something, making it perfect. All right, this is totally to be relaxing. So we're going to let that dry for a minute, and we're going to start over here on this side of the heart to be able to give that a few minutes to kind of dry. I don't want anything bleeding over to it. And I'm going to go straight to my magenta. And because I know I want this, you might want to keep this light, but I want it to be vibrant. All right. So with that, then I will start with this pigment, but I'm going to add quite a bit of pigment to it. You can do a light layer if you want first. Just go down, just fill in the little lacy edges. And I'm just actually pulling the paint from that. And I'll go over here and fill my brush up a little bit more and wipe it off. But you don't want too much. It'll become messy and you're working with a small area. Be real light with your brush. Don't push down hard with it. Keep it up light off the surface. It's like a feather. You're just feathering over the top of it. I don't know why, but this image came to my mind. Side note here for a second. When I would brush my daughter's hair, they had such sensitive heads and they hated it because it's like, oh, ouch, 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 ouch. If you've got daughters and you've ever brushed through their hair and they've got a sensitive head, you know exactly what I'm talking about there. And you're trying really hard. You've got to get in there and get that knot out, but you're trying not to pull the hair out. I don't know why I thought about that when I thinking about this, but you're doing this very gently. The pressure is a gentle pressure. It's not a hard, harsh pressure. Okay. This has a beautiful faint to it, and you could leave it like that. You could lift a little bit of this color up simply by taking a clean brush of water and going back over it, or using your paper towel and lift it. I'm going to go deeper, darker, but I do love the softness of it. So if you want to leave it like that, it's beautiful. And then you can come back when we get to that point and you'll just outline it. Now, if you're wanting it a little bit darker, then I'm going to go straight to pigment and add that. And because it's already a little damp, the color will flow where the water was placed. Do not worry about getting every little section of it. If you've got a white area, all that just adds a nice texture to it. It's just part of the characteristic of watercolor. Okay, this is dried because I didn't use a lot of So I'm going straight pigment pretty much. It's almost a wet on dry here, but not quite. Wet on dry means your paint is wet and your surface is dry. All right, see, I'm just flowing it right down. There's quite a bit of difference. So if you want it soft, leave it. And maybe you put it on and it is too dark for you, then you can always go back. And I did that with one of these. I went back with just clean, my clean water or my water without the pigment on it, and went back over the areas, and it lifted up some of the color. It took some of the color off. The only thing you can't get it back to is the white of the surface it was once before. And we always used to have to use a masking. It was called a masking. It is still called a masking. But nowadays, they've also got, people will use maybe acrylic paint, or they'll use another type. I can't think of the name of it right now. I've never used it before and I want to experiment. So once I do that, I'll be able to tell you. But they'll use that and come back over to create those white highlights. I remember in the class that I was doing, and they were doing watercolor, the professor had us use rubber cement, just plain old rubber cement, to mask off the area. And then you went back afterwards and you rubbed that like you do rubber cement, and it took it off and it exposed the white surface and kept it perfectly white. Oh, that was one of my favorite. I just love that. I love that, to go back and you got the color, and then all of a sudden you take off, like this is masking here, you take it off, and the contrast of that pure white against the color. All right, we're moving along here. I'm going to turn it this way. Now I'm left-handed, so I'm having to move it to accommodate being left-handed. But you'll move it the direction that's the best for you. Now notice the watercolor didn't go all up in there. I've got kind of a light area. That may, let me pull it up here so you can see it. See the white in there? That might bother some, and others love it because that's just the characteristic of watercolor. Personally, I love that. But if it does bother you, then once this pink has dried completely, and you can use your hair dryer to do that, then you can come back, put a little daub of tiny bit of water, and add the color to it. There we go. All right. I'm lifting off some of that color right there. Okay. Whoops, be careful there. Almost tipped that over. So you can leave it like that. If you want to go back, let me show you, just if maybe you're thinking to yourself, oh, I've got too much color right there. I don't like that, or that's not what I wanted. Then you just take your brush with paint. I mean, not sorry, with just water. And you come back over that. And look, can you see how that water is lifting it up? See that right there? You can tell that lighter area is where the pigment was lifted, just because I used water. I'm going to leave that. It's kind of like having the cutouts in those particular hearts, So I'm going to lift a couple of these just for the fun of it. I'm not going to do all of them. All right. Let's go up here and do, let's see. I really like the darkness. I'm actually going to add dark to that one. Some people may want to lift that, but I like this darkness on this. So I'm going to make these two a little bit darker, richer. Let's call them richer. Fill them with a larger amount of pigment, a larger amount of color. There we go. Okay, we've got that done for right now. Now, just gently touch. Make sure you don't have anything wet over here on these because we're going to start on the flowers. Now the flowers. I start with an orange up here at the tip. And actually, watch what I do here. Let's start with this one. I'll put just the water right here to about midsection. Then I'll come back with the orange and I'll dab it and starting it up at the tip up here and let it flow down. Okay. Get that pigment up in there. I want that to be quite vibrant. I'm going to dry out my brush. I cleaned it, but I'm going to dry it out. I'm going to go to the magenta. And I'll just gently, this is a very light hand. I'll just start painting. And you see the orange started pulling down, but you've got some of the magenta right there. Let me pull you closer again. See what that did? Now I'm going to let that just dry for a second because I'm wanting it to be darker down here. So what I'll do is I'll come down here at the bottom with my color and I'm going to move up. Otherwise, and if you end up having orange all the way down to the bottom, it's perfect. It's just the way it needs to be. That flower just decided to do that. Do you ever see two flowers exactly the same? If you looked really close at them, no, you really don't. Okay, I'm adding straight pigment of the magenta and I'm going to tap it there. Look at that just spread right out. Isn't that wonderful? So it's creating its own shading and dimension. Oh, that's pretty. Now it's really wet right this minute. I'm going to let it sit because I want it to kind of soak and then I'll come in and move that around. I've still got quite a bit of pigment on my brush here. So I'm going to go to the next one. I don't want to waste it by cleaning out my brush to go to the orange. I'll just go to the next one. And I'll add it here. Dip it into the water here. I'm not wasting it because it's going right over to that. And then I'll just pull this up a little bit. Okay, now I'll clean my brush. I'll go to the orange. And I'll start at the tip. I'll move down. Those little V's right there. This flower comes out the side. And I'll move it down towards the pink. And just naturally by, when you brush stroke, it'll move itself into the pink. There we go. It did it all by itself. Isn't that wonderful? See that? It creates its own shading. You don't have to sit there and do layers and layers and layers. See how it's got that light in that? It's got that great. Yep, I love it. All right, let's go back since I've got a little more orange in my brush. We're going to start this one up here at the top. And we have to be a little careful there because that's wet and it will bleed into each other. So I probably should have started with that one. If you haven't started yet, go to the next one. But I'll do this like this. Right? And very carefully. And if it bleeds over, it's okay, right? Because what's the rules here? The rules are there are no mistakes. I'm being careful. What I'm doing here is I'm not bringing it right up to that edge, but I want to blend those together and put that layer in there. So I'm going to leave that and then I'll come back to it. Okay. Just to give you another close view. There we go. Let's go to let's move to this one. It's really a lot better if you do every other one. Then you don't run into the possibility of it bleeding over into another one. Bringing down my orange. And this really is just play with it. You cannot go wrong with these flowers. I don't have any idea if I'm sure there's a flower like this, but I didn't draw this from a flower that I saw. I'm sure there's a tropical flower of some sort. Okay, now I started getting a little bit too much water there, so I got to clean out my brush. Dry my brush, and I'll just put it down in here, and it's gonna soak up some of that water right there, and I can sort of massage it down a little bit because I really want it to create that light and then the dark. Now you can do this by doing one whole layer of light and then come back and do another layer and another layer in small areas, and you create that darkness. But I'm doing it a little bit different, faster. And I'm letting it just sort of pushing that up in there, letting it create its own design. I want it dark down here at the bottom, so I'll go straight magenta. And while it's still wet, I will add that to the bottom surface. And I'm going to let the water pull it up. So I'll just kind of coax it a little bit, coax it up just by tapping it and dabbing it. Okay. You just stand back and look at it a little bit and go, I might want to add a little more here. Or if you added too much and you're like, oh, I didn't want that much there, then you just clean out your brush, dry it off, and lift it up or use your towel. But really, it's just pretty however it wants to do it all by itself. Let's go back in now and do this next one. We're going to start with the orange at the tip. And if I am moving too fast, remember, this is going to be a recording and you can go back and stop the recording. So if you're still back working on your leaves, I just had that thought. I don't want you stressing out going, wait, I'm not there yet. Just work slow and enjoy. And then once this is over, I will get the recording up. It'll take me a little bit of time, but the recording will be up. And you can continue. Okay, I'm going straight to my orange because I want this to be dark right in here. And I don't want to add any more water. So if I was to dab from here, I would have water in that. And I don't want to add any more water to this. So I'm going straight to the pigment palette over here. Okay. To get rid of those kind of harsh edges, try my brush, pick up the pigment with the water, and come back and hit that like that. And it will take care of getting rid of that hard area. Well, dry my brush off a little bit while I've got the pigment wet. That's the orange. Let's darken this up here so that it's more consistent because these others. And you can look at it and see, you see as it dries, it lightens. I'm gonna work this down a little bit. Leave it for a second. Add some more orange, and we're gonna drop it in here. Drop it in here. Pull it down, pull it down. Get the water and soften it. And instead of pulling it all the way, what I'll do is I'll take my brush, dry it off, and then just lift it back this way. Okay. And it's creating too much of a line right here. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to go back up like this and lift some of this that came down. Not all of it, but some of it, because I want it to blend. I don't want you to see a line that goes straight across. This one, we'll add the pink, the magenta. I keep saying pink, but it's magenta. Dab the darkness in the corners down here at the bottom. Let it flow up towards the top. Blend in there. Okay. Dry off my brush. And just go back this way and pull it back down. Your goal is not to create, it doesn't really matter how you blend the colors, but you don't want to create definite lines. Just like that's a definite line right there. You don't really want to create a definite line. You want them blending together, merging together. Okay, let's add the magenta. And I'm going to coax it up. See, I'm coaxing it by pushing it a little bit. Give it a little coax up there. Go meet that orange. Go make friends. We're going to tap down here. Okay. And it did the work all by itself. Isn't that wonderful? Can you see that well enough? Is it blurry? Yeah, wonderful. All right, I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to dab back into this magenta, but I want it to be just a little bit of watered. And we're going to do a light coat in here. You've got that little tip of the flower that comes out that's, I can't think of the correct name of it right now. But if you accidentally paint over that, not a problem, because you can use black. I did black in one and gold in another. So this it starts with an S. I can't think of the name of it. I should know that. Do you remember back in school when we had to memorize all the parts of the flower? Some things just don't stay if you don't use them, right? Now I'm lifting that up because it was getting just as dark as the edges and I wanted it to be lighter. So I lifted up some of the watercolor there and it's going to go lighter. Typically the inside would be darker just because it's an inside and the shadowing and the darkness, but I'm going lighter because I really want to emphasize and create it to be 3D instead of just a 2D. I want it to have some dimension to it, so I'm going to leave it lighter. It's still fairly dark. Okay, now we are about done with that. I'm going to take my gun. Making sure it's drying. I can guarantee you that if I wasn't sitting here doing a class, I would probably be going over it and over it and over it, just because of finding it to be so relaxing. All right, now we're going to take a black fine tip marker and outline it. You don't have to. The pencil line itself creates it. Let me just try something, just mostly to demonstrate here for you, but this, it's a lot of the darkness stayed there, and of course I can put my dark line on there with my marker and create the dimension I want. But let's just see what happens now that that's dried. Dry off my brush a little bit, and let's come back and see if I can lift some of that up a little bit. See, you can. You can't tell it so well there, but you see how that lifted that up, the water did? And I'm talking about right there where I added the water and lifted that up. Okay. All right, let's see now what we're going to do. Wash out our brushes. Don't leave them in the water. Let's take, I want a permanent marker, and we'll outline it. And it depends on how thick of a line you want. Depends on, these are super great, these micron pens are permanent, and then you get such fine lines if you want them, or you get thicker lines. I'm going to go with a 0-1. 0-1. And usually I'm a little bit, when I'm doing this myself, I'm always a little nervous because, you know, my brain is starting to trigger and go, oh, that's permanent. That's permanent. Make sure you're doing it right. So you start to get a little bit nervous about it. So I've turned it upside down so that I lose the whole concept of what it is. And I just start looking at the line itself and then drawing along the line. If you go off a little bit, no big deal. Consider it part of the character. We're going to outline the whole thing. And see right there's example of what I just said to you. That line is not right up against the paint, but that's going to be just fine. Because I just love the looseness that watercolor has. It's not something that says it must be this. Right? I'm just sort of bouncing around different spots and outlining it. Now here's that little center, and I'm gonna color it in dark. One thing to remember is all the little flaws or all the little whatevers, the little things that, no one's going to see those. We hear that all the time, don't we? But we see it. We're like, but I can see it. I can see it. Well, try not to focus on that. Why don't make the decision to focus on something else? Okay, so this one goes like this, and as I create that line, it actually outlines the other one for me. And I just bring this like this, and then this goes around like this. All right, we're doing great. We're just moving right along here. I'm moving you quite quickly on purpose, because if you go slow, then you tend to want to you're constantly picking at it, messing with it. Just moving along here, making our decision and going with it. Another way you can do your line, if you want it to just be very loose and not real defined, is to take your line and draw along, and then lift your pen up, skip some space, and come back down with your pen. You can do it that way. I'm going to follow mine through, though, because that's consistently what I've been doing. All right, going around this leaf. That joins in right there. Joins in right there. Okay, so I've got all that on that side. Whoops. Oh, missed that little guy right there, didn't I? I've got all of that outlined. Kind of look over it. I don't see anything that I've missed. Now let's go to this side. It's easier for me to start from this way. And if you have to stop at where one of these little points, where it V's in. Okay. My line went up into the white. If that bothers you, then you can come back simply and take some of the pink and go in there. That's easy to fix if that's something that's annoying to you. Most of the little things that are annoying to us can easily be fixed, though. Or just become part of the design. There, all the way down. Now that is complete. And actually, that is annoying to me. So I am going to take my little brush and I'm going to go back over to, and the only reason it is because that's just so harsh of a line right here of the pink that it just stops. So I'm going to take a little bit of the pink and we're going to fill that in right here. And I'm going to go back to the color magenta in my palette. Load my brush carefully. You know, it's already starting just to kind of bleed it back in, but I'll just add the color and that'll fill that right in. There. Okay, some of these aren't, and that's fine. That's to me just the characteristic of watercolor. That other one was too much in my face. My eye definitely would go to that every single time. So I wanted to fix that. Now you could leave it like this. That's beautiful. Or you could create with what's called stippling some shadow. So I'm going to just take a minute and show you how to do that here on this one. It's basically little tiny dots randomly done in an area, and as they kind of clump together, you're not trying to make a huge dot, but the more you get, the darker the area becomes. So just a few little stipplings. For example, up here would probably be a little bit of shadowing in that flower. Okay, so I can put a dot just very lightly. I don't know if you can even see it on camera. I'm gonna have to lift it up. See that? Just very, very lightly. And that creates a little bit of shadow. Remember I said wherever they kind of things meet tends to have a little more shadowing there. So I'll put a few more up in those little V areas. Okay. It just adds texture to it also, but it gives that shading for the flower. Okay. The one thing I didn't do is I didn't do these lines here. Okay. Another area you could do a little stippling. I mean, you could, add it down under here in the bottom if you wanted, but I'm not going to go to do it that much. Is underneath where it bends. And it just helps with that. Okay. Go keep lifting it up so you can kind of see. There. Figuring out if I bring it quickly, it will focus on it. Let's do it right in here because it's where these two are meeting. And here. And down here underneath that one, because it's going to have a little bit of shadow. Little shadow there. A little bit here. Now you don't have to do the stippling. You can simply do it with the watercolor and create that shadow, which I pretty much have it, but I just wanted to show you that technique. Another thing you can do with this, you can leave these little things like they are, or you can come in and add some little dots around the edge, just like the lace, usually has a little bit of cutouts or something in it. And that's what that does. It's all the little extra details that you add to something that brings it even more to life. Okay, we are about through. I'm going to finish up these and we will call it good and start taking off the tape. It'll be the unveiling time. Okay. Close up my pen. I'm going to bring this up here close so you can see the little dots. See that? Adds to it. Now, let's unveil our piece of art. And be careful as you go across the paper. There has been times when I have lifted it up, and a little piece of the paper came too. So you want to be gentle. And what I've done, if that little piece of, because it doesn't like rip it totally through, but it will lift a little layer, I'll just take a little glue and put underneath it and lay it back flat. And there it is. Yay. Awesome. Beautiful. Now, don't forget to sign your piece of art. That's too big of a pen. Tiny one. Still pretty big. Let's go back to this dot one. Sign your piece of art. And then enjoy giving it to someone. You can even put a date on it. And that's our project. I am so glad that you did this with me. And please take your project and go to the Facebook page and post it. RPC Village. I have to get the exact name and I'll send that out. But thank you. Let me take this off of record. So I'm going to stop sharing. All right, I just paused for a minute because I wanted to take a look at those that were participating to see their work and not have it go across the whole lesson here. And it's beautiful. They're all just working away at it and creating their own, and they're different. That's the other neat thing. They're both different. They're all unique and individual, and yours will be also. So I really appreciate you coming and joining in with me today. I hope you will take time to go to my website, realpositivechange.com. I've got a tab up there that talks about the monthly painting group. I've got a village of artisans coming together, people that are enjoying to use art as a way of relieving stress and just creating wellness in their life. Now, with your project, please go to the Facebook page if you're on Facebook, which you probably are because you received this through Facebook. RPC the Artisan's Journey. That is a group that I've put together that you're able to go ahead and post your work. So please take a moment and join that group, become part of the members, help it to grow and expand and encourage one another, add good comments to each other and help each other to take the time to move forward. Have a wonderful day.